Hello to all our listeners. Today we will be studying Hilchot Eruvin Perek Gimel. I'll give a quick introduction to the chapter, just as to keep us on track. So far, the halachot we were dealing with the laws of Eruv in one haser that has many tenants, many residents. In the following chapter, we will see the laws regarding the Eruv of two or more haserot. In short, the following chapter deals with the connections between more than one haserot and their intermingling. Our chapter is divided into 7 main sections. The first 9 halachot of the chapter deal with the connection of more than one haserot. When do we consider the haserot to be connected, making the eruv with both of them a requirement? When do we consider them to be disconnected, making an eruv between the two haserot an impossibility? And when do we consider the two haserot to be connected, but in a way leaving the residents of the haser with an option to do a joint eruv if they so please? Second part of the chapter is the laws of a break in between two haserot, either in a wall or in the ground. In a wall. The third part of the chapter deals with the laws of a crack in between two haserot in the ground. The fourth part deals with the laws of a joint wall in between two haserot. The fifth part deals with the performing of an eruv in between roofs and karpefot. Now, what is a karpef? This is very important this is a term that is important to remember. I will explain it when we reach it, but it is important to remember to understand in order to understand our chapter. A karpef is an area which, according to scriptural law, is considered to be a private domain. However, a karpef is an area that was walled in order to be a place in which people not in order to be a place in which people regularly reside in. So that it's a place like that. So from scripturally, it's a private domain. However, because it was not walled for people to regularly reside in it, therefore the sages prohibited carrying in it if it was more than the size of a bit satan, 5,000 squared amot. Sixth part of the chapter will be the laws of a separating wall that is placed in a well of water in the ground. And the seventh and last final part of our chapter will be the separating walls and pathways that were ruined on Shabbat. So let's get right into it. Halakha Aleph. Halon sheben shetei haserot. A window that was in between two haserot. אם יש בו 4 טפחים על 4 טפחים או יותר על זה, והיה קרוב מן הארץ בתוך 10 טפחים, אפילו כולו למעלה מ10 ומקצתו בתוך 10, או כולו בתוך 10 ומקצתו למעלה מ10. So we're talking about a window that is in between two haserot that are very close one to another. If the window is 4 by 4 tefachim in width and length, or more, and the window was within 10 tefachim of the ground, whether part of the window was within 10 tefachim or the whole window was within tefachim does not matter. אם רצו יושבי שתי החסרות לערב כולן עירוב אחד, הרשות בידם. So within 10 tefachim of the ground, that's what I meant. אם רצו יושבי שתי החסרות לערב כולן עירוב אחד, הרשות בידם ויעשו כחסר אחת וטלטלו מזו לזו. ואם רצו מערבים שני עירובין אלו לעצמן ואלו לעצמן. In such a situation where the connection between two haserot is with a window or some sort of opening which is within 10 tefachim of the ground, the option is of the residents of the haser, whether or not, based on their own preference. If they prefer to do an eruv, they may do an eruv between both haserot, and if not, they do not have to. היה חלון פחות מ4 שהיה כולו למעלה מ10 מערבים שני עירובין אלו לעצמן ואלו לעצמן. If the halon, if the window, if the opening connecting the two Eruvin was less wide than 4 by 4 tefachim, or it was higher than 10 tefachim above the ground, then in that case, it is prohibited, it is impossible for those two haserot to do a joint eruv in between them. Halakha bet. במה דברים אמורים? הרמב"ם is going to specify. בחלון שבין שתי חסרות, אבל בין שבין שני בתים, אפילו היה למעלה מ10. The case of a window connecting two places for eruv is specifically with the window that is in between two haserot, two courtyards. אבל שבין שני בתים, however, a window that was in between two houses, even if it was above 10 tefachim, it is still valid to allow both of the houses to be me'uravim together. The reason it is mutar to do an aruv between two houses, even if the connecting window is above 10 tefachim, is because there's a rule that says, Beta keman demale dameh. A house is as though it was filled up. So even though the window is above 10 tefachim, we see it as though the window itself is no higher than 10 tefachim because it's as though the house was filled up with objects, therefore making it that the ground of the house is insignificant and the 10 tefachim height rule does not apply in the house. וכן חלון שבין בית לעלייה עם רסום מערבין עירוב אחד, אף על פי שאין ביניהם סולם. And also an opening between a house that is privately owned by one person and the floor above it is also owned by a different person. When it is owned by a different person, when it is under a different ownership and is inhabited by somebody else, right? For instance, in a case in which the house has another floor above it under someone else's ownership, like an attic of sorts, you would have thought that maybe perhaps you would need some kind of ladder connecting the two floors. But the answer is that no, you do not. And this is all on condition that the window splitting between the top residence and the bottom residence is at least 4 by 4 tefachim squared, or is a circle which could contain within it a 4 by 4 tefachim square, as we previously explained in previous chapters. And I'm reading in the Hebrew, היה חלון עגול אם יש בו כדי לרבע בו 4 הרי הוא כמרובע. הלכה ג' כותל שבין שתי חסרות. או מתבן שבין שתי חסרות. A wall that is in between two חסרות, or a pile of hay which is in between two חסרות. פחות מ10 טפחים מערבין עירוב אחד ואין מערבין שניים. היה גבוה מ10 טפחים, מ10 או יותר על כן, מערבין שני עירובין, אלו לעצמן ואלו לעצמן. ואם היה ביניהם סולם מכאן וסולם מכאן, הרי הן כפתח, ואם רסו מערבין אחד. So, a wall that is in between two hasirot, or a pile of hay which is in between two hasirot, if they're less than 10 tefachim tall, then the residents of the hasir are obligated to do a joint iruv for both of the hasirot. And if they were taller than 10 tefachim, the wall or the hay, the pile of hay, then they are allowed to do only a separate iruv. They may not do a joint iruv. However, if in between the two hasirot there was a ladder, okay? One moment. ואם היה ביניהם סולם מכאן וסולם מכאן, הרי הם כפתח והם רסו מערבין אחד. ואפילו היה סולם זקוף וסמוך לכותל, שהרי אין יכולים לעלות בו עד שימשך ויתרחק מתחתיו מן הכותל, הרי זה מטיר, ואפילו לא היה מגיע ראש הסולם לראש הכותל, אם נשאר ביניהם פחות משלושה, הרי זה מטיר ומערבין אחד עם רסו. So, if there was between the two hasirot, there was a ladder from each side of the wall or pile of hay, then it is considered as though there is some sort of opening between the two hasirot, allowing the residents of the hasirot to have an option whether or not to do a joint iruv or to do a separate iruv. The halakha permits that even if the ladder is just high enough to be within 3 tefachim from the other ladder, even if it is reached this height, even if this height is reached while the ladder is being leaned flat against the wall, which is not the natural way in which people usually go up a ladder. Usually the ladder is a little bit tilted, right, in order to go up it. And if we tilt it, maybe it won't reach within the 3 tefachim of the other ladder because it'll be a little lower. It is still considered a sufficient pathway between the two hasirot, and will be a pathway which allows us to do an iruv between the two hasirot. And again, this is even though the ladder reached within 3 tefachim of the other ladder by leaning flat and not by being tilted, as naturally with ladders, usually you need a ladder to be tilted. הלכה ג' היה הכותל רחב 4 ועשה סולם מכאן וסולם מכאן, אף על פי שהסולמות מרוחקות זו מזה, אם רצו מערבין אחד. If the wall that the ladders were leaning on was 4 tefachim thick, so you have a wall that's 4 tefachim thick, and there were ladders from each side, there is an option for the residents of the Haser to do a joint iruv if they want to, or a separate eruv if they want to, as long as each of the ladders reach the top of the side of the wall that they are leaning on. And this is only if the wall's thickness is at least 4 tefahim, in which case it is like, we consider it like a balcony in between two haserot. However, אין ברוחב הכותל 4, אם אין בין הסולמות שלושה מערבין אחד, היה ביניהם שלושה מערבין 2. However, if the wall is less than 4 tefahim thick, then the distance between the ladders has to be at most 3 tefahim. Otherwise, there's no permission to make an eruv in between the two haserot. So that's an important halakha. Halakha he. בנה מחצבה על גבי מחצבה בצד הכותל. אוקיי. אם יש בתחתונה 4 ממעט, אין בתחתונה 4 ואין בינה לבין העליונה 3 ממעט, ואם רסו מערבין אחד, וכן במדרגות של עץ שסמכן לכותל. If there are 2 shelves or ledges of sorts that were built on a wall, okay, built on a wall, in other words, protruding out of a wall, and one was above the other. If the bottom ledge is 4 tefahim by 4 tefahim wide, and lengthwise and widthwise, then the bottom of the wall is counted to have started from the bottom shelf. If the shelf or ledge, however, is not 4 by 4 tefahim, and there is less than 3 tefahim in between the 2 shelves, then it also shortens the overall height of the wall to be considered to start from the bottom shelf. So if from the bottom shelf to the top of the wall, for example, you would have 4 tefahim, or 7 tefahim, then it would be considered that the wall is 7 tefahim. Even if below the bottom shelf there is another 8 tefahim. Even if really the whole wall is like 15 tefahim, doesn't matter. We start from the bottom shelf. In both of these cases, they have the option of making a joint eruv and the option of making a separate eruv. And this is the law as well with the staircase that's base is at least 4 by 4 tefahim, and there's less than 3 tefahim between each stair. Okay, because then it becomes like ledges that are one on top of the other. Halakha vav. Kotel gaboha sheben shetei hatzerot. This is Yosef Emsa'ito. So we have a wall separating between 2 haserot that is more than 10 tefahim high, and the wall has some sort of protrusion of sorts coming out of it from the middle of the wall. אם נשאר מן הזיז עד ראש הכותל פחות מ10, מניח סולם לפני הזיז ומערבין אחד אם רסו. אבל מניח הסולם בסד הזיז אינו ממעט. So, if from the protrusion and until the top of the wall there is less than 10 tefahim, then it is permitted to put a ladder that leads up to the protrusion, which would then cause the wall to be considered less than 10 tefahim high. Therefore, giving us the option of making an eruv between both the haserot, a joint eruv or a non-joint eruv. However, if the ladder was put to either side of the protrusion, then it does not consider the wall to be shorter than it is. היה הכותל גבוה 19 טפח. מוציא זיז אחד באמצע ומערבין אחד עם רסו. שהרי מן הזיז עד הארץ פחות מ10 ומן הזיז עד ראש הכותל פחות מ10. Okay, and this is a little bit of a different case. So if the wall was 19 tefahim high in its entire height, then a protrusion can be put in the middle of the wall. One protrusion will be enough in order to be sufficient to allow the option of a joint eruv in between the 2 haserot, of course, using a haser. And this is because using a ladder. And this is because in between the protrusion to the floor, there's less than 10 tefahim. And also from the protrusion to the top of the wall, there's also less than 10 tefahim. Therefore, it is as though the wall itself is less than 10 tefahim. Now, we have another halakha, a little different. If the wall, היה הכותל גבוה 20 טפח, 20 טפחים. צריך שנזיזין זה שלא כנגד זה, עד שיהיה בין הזיז התחתון ובין הארץ פחות מ10, ובין הזיז העליון ובין ראש הכותל פחות מ10 ומערבין אחד עם רסו. So, if the wall was 20 tefahim high, then it could be made to accommodate one joint eruv only if 2 protrusions are put in place, not directly one on top of the other, in a manner in which from the bottom protrusion to the bottom of the wall, there's less than 10 tefahim. And from the top protrusion until the top of the wall, there's less than 10 tefahim. And in between the two protrusions, there's less than 3 tefahim, and a ladder is put until the bottom protrusion. Halakha Zayin. These are very technical halachot, and I'm explaining them in as a concise manner as possible. And if anybody needs to listen again, of course, they can always listen to the recording and go back and listen again to the halachot. Halakha Zayin. דקל שחתכו וסמכו על ראש הכותל ועל הארץ מערבין אחד הם רסו ואינו צריך לקובעו בבניין וכן הסולם כובדו קובעו ואינו צריך לחברו בבניין. A palm tree that was chopped and leaned against a wall, or any tree. Okay? And so it's chopped and leaned against the wall as a sort of ladder or stepping way to go up the wall. And the tree was from the top of the wall and leaning to the ground. It was going from top of the wall to the ground. It may be used, in this case, to accommodate the wall to allow a joint eruv, thus making it optional for the two eruvin or one joint eruv. Okay? Now the tree does not need to be connected to this is a big hadush. The tree itself does not need to be connected to the structure that it's leaning on, to the wall that it's leaning on. This is because the weight of the tree itself considers it to be heavy enough to be considered set in place. Also with the ladder, its weight is what considers it to make the wall valid to be considered as though it has an entrance, even though it isn't connected to the wall itself, technically speaking, because the weight of the ladder has it as though it's planted to the ground. Now, היו קשים מבדילים בין שתי החסרות, וסולם מכאן וסולם מכאן אין מערבין אחד, שהרי אין כף הרגל עולה בסולם לפי שאין לו על מה יסמוך. היה הסולם באמצע, וקשים מכאן וקשים מכאן, אם רסו מערבין שיניים. Now, this is a little bit of a different case. If there was a large pile of hay that was taller than 10 tefachim, and there was a ladder from each side, no joint eruv could be placed in this case. Why? Because the ladder, and they have to do a separate eruv. Why? Because the ladder in its position, leaning on the hay, does not permit anyone to climb on it. Because the hay is not sufficiently stable to allow people to use a ladder to lean on it. However, if there was one ladder in between hay from either side, there was hay leaning on the ladder, keeping the ladder stable, set in place, and the ladder is stable enough to allow people to climb it, then in that case, an eruv can optionally be placed between the two. A joint eruv could be placed, or a separate eruv based on their preference, as we said previously. Halakha het. היה אילן בצד הכותל, ועצאות סולם לכותל. אם רסו מערבין אחד, הואיל ואיסור שבות, הוא שגרם שלא יעלה באילן. So if there was a tree, okay, a tree that was in the ground, that was leaning on a wall, and he made the tree into a ladder to go up the wall. In this case, if they want to, they may do an eruv between these two walls, these two haserot, with the tree used as the ladder. And this is because the isur of going up a tree on Shabbat is only an isur derabanan. It's only a isur from the sages. And the guiding rule for this halacha is that the derabanan prohibitions are usually not placed one on top of the other. So in our case, for example, climbing the tree on Shabbat is a derabanan prohibition. So really from scriptural law, the pathway using the tree is a valid pathway if it wasn't for the prohibition placed by the sages. And because the obligation for the eruv is one also placed and formulated by the sages, right? The obligation for eruv itself, they were less stringent and didn't place a prohibition, a derabanan prohibition on top of a derabanan prohibition. However, asa ashera sulam lakotelin. Ashera is a tree used for idol worship. It's like an idol of sorts that they worship to connect to the star Astarte. Okay? This is asur to go on. This is prohibited to climb, not from derabanan, but rather from scriptural law, because it's avodah zarah. In this case, there's no permission to even enjoy any part of the asherah, and therefore it is not permitted to use it as an eruv even though regular trees may be used as an eruv, even though it is not permitted to go on a tree on Shabbat, to climb on a tree on Shabbat, because we, as I previously said, we do not place prohibition of the sages on top of a prohibition on the sages. And this is in most cases. There are some cases which are which come out of this, which do not fall under this this kelal, but in most cases it is like this. They're not so stringent. Halakha tet. כותל שגבוה 10 ובא למערפו כדי לערב עירוב אחד אם יש באורך המיעוט 4 טפחים מערבין אחד. So a wall that was at least 4 by 4 tefahim in width and was above 10 tefahim tall, and an individual wanted to be able to have the option to do an eruv between both of the haserot, the joint eruv. If he broke the wall in a way making some kind of deck on the remaining part of the wall, okay, that is 4 tefahim in width, and does not, and leaves from the floor of the deck to the top of the wall less than 10 tefahim, he may have the option. He may have the option in this case, as long as, of course, it's 4 tefahim in width, and there's less than 10 tefahim from the floor of the deck to the top of the wall. He may have the option in this case to place an eruv in between both of the walls, as long as from the deck until the top of the wall again, there's less than 10 tefahim. סתן מקצת הכותל, עד שנתמעט מעשרה, סידו הקצר, נותנים אותו לחסר זו, ושאר הכותל הגבוה לבין שתי החסרות. However, if the width of the deck was less than 4 tefahim, then there's no option to place, there's no place for an optional eruv, but rather they must do a separate eruv for each one of the haserot. And the parts, and the part that was broken is considered part of the haser that it was next to, and the rest of the wall is considered as a separator between the two haserot. Halakha Yod. In the following two halachot, so Yod and Yod Aleph, we will see the law regarding a break in between a wall splitting two haserot. So let's get into it. נפרס הכותל הגבוה שביניהם. אם הייתה הפרסה עד 10 אמות, מערבין שני ערובים. ואם רסו מערבין אחד. מפני שהוא כפתח. ואם הייתה יותר מ10, מערבין ערוב אחד, ואין מערבין שני ערובים. A wall that was above 10 tefahim, that had a break lengthwise, forming an opening in the wall, a widthwise opening in the wall. If the opening was less than 10 tefahim wide, then it is considered an opening, thus making a joint eruv between the haserot optional. However, if it was wider than 10 amot, mehila, the width, I was talking about 10 amot, so if it was less than 10 amot wide, then it is considered an opening that was an opening, thus allowing it to be a joint eruv made between the haserot. However, if the opening was wider than 10 amot, the break was wider than 10 amot, then it is no more considered an opening, and makes it mandatory in this case to make an eruv between both of these haserot. So there's no option for the joint eruv, but rather it's mandatory to have a joint eruv between the two haserot. Halakha Yod Aleph. הייתה הפרסה פחות מ10. If the break was less than 10 אמות wide. ובא להשלימה ליתר מ10, חוקק בכותל גובה 10 טפחים ומערבין עירוב אחד. Now let's say the break in between the walls was less than 10 tefahim wide, and now they wanted it to be 10 tefahim wide. So it's enough for them to make a crack in the wall that is less than, sorry, oh my gosh, let me repeat. The break in the wall was less than 10 amot wide, and they wanted it to be 10 amot wide, so they wanted to break more part of the wall. So it's enough for them to break a break that is less than 10 tefahim high, okay? And that is exactly 10 tefahim high, even though it's not through lengthwise through the length of the whole wall, that less than 10 tefahim high break in the wall, which makes it in width 10 amot wide, allows the wall to be considered a full opening, thus making it mandatory to have an eruv with both of the haserot, a joint eruv. However, if there's a wall that he wants to break from the get-go that didn't have a crack in it, and he wants to break it, make a big opening, a 10 amot, more than 10 amot opening, then he must do this in a way which allows him to walk in while standing fully and not 10 tefahim, which is like about 80 centimeters, which is a very low, it's just the lowest amount that makes it considered an opening. No, you have to make an opening that you could go through properly. Halakha Yud Bet. So in the following three halachot, Yud Bet, Yud Gimel, Yud Dalet, we'll see the law of a crack in the floor in between two haserot. So here we had the past two was a law in the crack in the wall. Now we have the laws of a crack in the floor. So haris sheben shetei haserot, a crack in between two haserot. Amok 10 ולחבר באו יותר, מערבין שני עירובין. פחות מכאן מערבין אחד ואין מערבין שניים. So if they had a crack in the floor in between two עירובין that was deep 10 tefachim and wide 4 by 4 tefachim or more, in this case they make an iruv between, they make two separate iruvim. However, if the dimensions of this crack in the floor were in the crack separating between the two haserot were less than the aforementioned dimensions, in other words, they were less than 10 tefachim length, 10 tefachim in height, and 4 by 4 tefachim, in this case, they have to, it is mandatory for them to do a joint iruv, and they cannot do a separate iruv. And they cannot do a separated iruv for each one of the haserot. Also, if he made the dimensions of this crack in the ground between the two iruvim smaller by adding dirt or stones into the pit, into the crack in between the haserot, also in this case they must do a joint iruv. It is considered as though the crack was made smaller, thus connecting the two haserot, thus making a joint iruv mandatory for them. Because usually in most cases when you put dirt or stones in a crack in the floor, it, so to speak, closes it off, the area that the stones and dirt were put on. However, if he filled the crack with hay or straw, it is not considered as though they made the pit's dimensions smaller, and therefore he still must do, in this case, he would do a separate iruv for each one of the haserot with the proper dimensions allowing. Halakha Yud Gimel. וכן, אם מיעט רוחבו בלוח או בקנה שהושיט באורך כל החריס, מערבין אחד ואין מערבין שניים. Also, if an individual wanted to make this pit's width the pit's width smaller, let's say the width was 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, and he wanted to make it less than 4 by 4 tefachim, thus making the two haserot be considered connected, thus causing them to make it mandatory for a joint iruv. So he wants to make the width smaller by adding some sort of board or sticks that he puts to the lengthwise in the whole pit. Then this is enough to make it considered to make the haserot be considered connected. And anything that is allowed to be carried on Shabbat, like a basket or a cup, or some large cup, is not allowed to be used on Shabbat for this process. Unless this thing that is allowed to be carried on Shabbat is stuck into the ground in a manner that is sufficient enough to keep it planted in the ground. So the guiding rule for this halakha is that a placement lengthwise in a pit must be placed in a stable manner. However, if it's not placed in a stable manner, then it is not sufficient to consider the pit smaller than its previous dimensions, but rather it will be considered as though the pit is containing the object. We won't make the pit's dimensions smaller. נתן לוח, הלכה י"ד, נתן לוח שרחב 4 טפחים על רוחב החריס, מערבין אחד, והם רסו מערבין שני ערובין. So if somebody put a board in the opening of the pit that was in between the two haserot, and the board was 4 by 4 tefachim wide on top of the pit, okay? In this case, it holds a joint iruv for the haserot, optional, because it could function either as a bridge or as an opening to the pit. וכן, שתי סרעות זו כנגד זו, אם הושיט לוח שרחב 4 טפחים מזו לזו, מערבין עירוב אחד, ואם רסו מערבין שני עירובין, אלו לעצמן ואלו לעצמן. Also, כסוסרעות, which are protrusions as well. So as well as the previous thing, 2 protrusions of sort that are coming out of the haserot over a separating pit, if they were connected by a board, this allows an option for doing a joint iruv in between the two haserot. However, if the protrusions that were above the pit were not directed one in front of the other, Okay, they were a little bit, one to the side of the other. So they weren't exactly facing each other. Or one was higher than the other. If there was less than 3 tefachim from one protrusion to the other, then they're as though they are connected. However, if there's more than 3 tefachim from one protrusion from the protrusion to protrusion, then the two hasirot have to do an eruv separately. Okay. Now the following 3 halachot will discuss a wall that is jointly used for 2 separate haserot that do not have an eruv placed in them or between them. Like they do not have a joint eruv for whatever reason may be. Halakha tetvav. Hayu zo besad zo. ואינן בשווה אלא אחת למעלה מחברתה. אם יש ביניהן פחות מ3 טפחים, הרי הן כסוסתרה אחת. ואם יש ביניהם 3 או יותר, מערבים אלו לעצמן ואלו לעצמן. Right. So I read this. I was using the Makbili edition. I read this in the previous halakha as halakha, part of halakha Yod Dalet. Now we are in halakha Tedvav according to the Makbili edition. So now in the following 3 halachot we'll discuss a wall that's jointly used for the 2 separate haserot that do not have an eruv placed in between them. So halakha Tedvav. Right. כותב שבין 2 חסרות שהוא רחב, והיה גבוה מ10 טפחים מחסר זו, ושווה לקרקע חסר שנייה. נותנים רוחבו לבני חסר, שהוא שווה להן, ויחשב מחסרן, הואיל ותשמישו בנחת לאלו, ותשמישו בקשה לאלו, נותנים אותו לאלו שתשמישו להן בנחת. So this halakha is discussing a case in which there are 2 haserot, one next to the other. But one of the haserot is lower than, lower by a few tefachim below is below the other one, okay? And there's a 10 tefachim wall in between them that is connected. So it's lower than by at least 10 tefachim below the other haser. One haser is below the other haser by at least 10 tefachim. And there's a wall in between them that is connected to one of the haserot. In other words, connected between the 2 haserot. The upper haser and the wall may be considered even as part of the floor to the upper haser. So the upper haser, which has an easier usage of the wall, is the one whose wall it will be considered that it is. Why? Because the usage for the upper haser is easier. So imagine you have I'm trying to think of the best way to illustrate it. I mean, again, so I'll just say it again. You have 2 haserot, but they're not in the same level. Their floors are in a different level. They are connected to each other, but they're not in the same level. Therefore, an eruv cannot be placed jointly in between them. Now, one haser is more than 10 tefachim higher than the other, a significant height. So the floor of one haser is more than 10 tefachim higher than the other. And then there's one below it. And there's a wall in between them, which reaches the floor of the top haser. The top of the wall reaches the floor of the top haser. Therefore, making the wall much easier for use for the top haser than the bottom haser, thus causing the top haser to be the one whose wall it's considered it belongs to, in a case which they do not do an eruv together, of course. וכן חדיס שבין 2 חסרות עמוק 10 טפחים מסד חסר זו ושווה לקרקע חסר שנייה, נותנים רוחבו לחסר שהוא שווה לו, מפני שתשמישו נחת לזה וקשה לזה, נותנים אותו לאלו שתשמישו להן בנחת. Also, right, so also a pit of sorts, or like a crack in the ground between these 2 haserot, which is as the dimensions we previously described, in 10 tefachim in depth and 4 tefachim, 10 tefachim in depth, and however less than 4 by 4 tefachim, and it is equal to the other haserot's. This hadith, the floor of the hadith, is equal to the floor of the bottom haser. In this case, we give the floor of the hadith. The hadith will be considered belong to the people, the residents of the bottom haser, because it is easier for use for them than the people of the top haser who would have to lower things into that floor. Halakha Tzayin. היה הכותל שבין שתי החסרות נמוך מחסר העליונה וגבוה מחסר התחתונה. So now we have two חסרות that are still the same two חסרות, which is one is much higher than the other. And there's a wall in between them. However, the wall does not reach the floor of the top haser. So the top of the wall does not reach the floor of the top haser, nor does it reach the bottom of the bottom haser, the floor of the bottom haser. However, it's in between, like a wall sitting. So for example, if the floor of the top haser was raised 10 tefahim above the ground, and the wall was only 5 tefahim above the ground, so the wall is sort of speaking between the two haserot, the use for the wall. שנפסעו בני עליונה משתמשים בעוביו על ידי שלשול ובני התחתונה משתמשים בעוביו על ידי זריקה. So in this case, of course, the use of the wall would be for the people in the top haser, they would have to lower things onto the wall in order to use it, and the people in the bottom haser would have to throw things in order to reach the top of the wall. In this case, שניהן אסורים בו עד שיערבו שתהן עירוב אחד. Both residents of both haserot are not permitted to use this wall until they do an iruv, connecting them as one joint haser. However, if they did not do an iruv, they may not put things to the width of the wall, in other words, on top of the wall, and take in from their haser onto it, or vice versa, because it is not for comfortable use for any of the residents of any of the haserot. הלכה י"ז שני בתים שביניהם חורבה שהיא רשות היחיד אם יכולים שניהם להשתמש בחורבה על ידי זריקה או סרים זה על זה ואם היה תשמישה לזה בנחת והאחר אינו יכול לזרוק לה מפני שהיא עמוקה ממנה הרי זה שהיא לא בנחת להשתמש בה על ידי זריקה. So if there were two houses which in between them, two houses which are of course private domain, which in between them there was a ruin of sorts that also was private domain, and none of them had comfortable access to the ruin, and rather their only access to it was by throwing into it, and that's it. So in this case, they must do an iruv in order to be able to have access to the hurba on Shabbat, or not be able to use the hurba on Shabbat. However, if the access to the hurba was comfortable for one of the owners of the houses, but not for the other, then the one who it is more comfortable for is the one who's allowed to use the hurba on Shabbat, because as we said, the guiding rule for all of these halachot is he who has more comfort in the use of a wall or a pit or anything in between two domains, two haserot, two private domains, the one who it is more comfortable, who the usage is more comfortable for, is the one who receives it as though it is his for Shabbat, if they do not do an iruv in between them, joining them. Halakha Yudhet. Now, in the following three halachot, we'll discuss the placing of an eruv for carrying from roofs in karpefot. So as explained in the introduction, a karpef is an area which, according to scriptural law, we consider it to be the private domain, a full-fledged private domain. However, if it was not walled in order to be a place in which people regularly reside in this case, the sages prohibit people from carrying it if it was more than the size of 5,000 square amot. So, kol gagot ha'ir, halakha yothet. Kol gagot ha'ir. אף על פי שזה גבוה וזה נמוך. עם כל החסרות. עם כל הקרפפות שהוקפו שלא לשם דירה, שאין בכל אחד מהן יתר על בצעתיים. So all of the roofs of the city, even roofs that are higher and lower than the other, including in this all, and Harambam will explain what I'm talking about now. It will be explained in the later halakha. So all the roofs in the city, whether or not they're aligned one with another height-wise, and all of the haserot in the city, as well as all of the karpefot that were not walled for dira, including all of the wall widths in between the haserot, including all of the alleyways leading to the haserot that have a lehi or kora, as described in the previous chapters. Kullan, reshut haten u'metaltelim b'chulan belo iruv, belo iruv. All of these are considered to be one domain, and they are permitted to carry from one to the other with no iruv. So I may carry from a roof to a haser, to a karpef, to an alleyway, with no iruv on Shabbat. Now this is an important specification that Harambam is making. Objects that entered Shabbat in one of these four domains, okay? We have roofs, haserot, karpefot, and ovyekotalim, and mero'ot, 5 domains. So an object that was there with the entrance of Shabbat. אבל לא כלים ששבתו בתוך הבית, אלא אם כן ערבו. So only if the kelim, the objects that you're carrying from these domains to each other, from these 5 domains, one into another, interchangeably, enter Shabbat inside these domains. However, if they enter Shabbat inside the private domain, inside the home, a domain in which people live, even though you're allowed to maybe take out from the house to the haser because you made eruv, you wouldn't be allowed to take from the haser to another haser and to another karpef, etc., etc., etc. This would only be if the object rested, entered Shabbat in that domain, so in the karpef or in the roof. The object was in the roof during the entrance of Shabbat. Now on Shabbat you may move it to another roof without an eruv. Halacha yotet. Kesad. How? Harabam is not going to specify. Keli sheshavat betoch haser. An object that enters Shabbat within the confines of the haser. Ben ערבו אנשי החסר ben לא ערבו מותר להעלותו מן החסר לגג או לראש הכותל. So whether or not the residents of the haser did eruv or not, it is permitted to take that object and bring it to the top of a roof or to the top of a wall. ומן הגג לגג אחר הסמוך לו אפילו היה גבוה ממנו כלשהו הנמוך, and from that roof to another roof, even if it was lower or higher than it, מן הגג אחר לחסר השני, and from that roof to a different haser even. ומחסר שנייה לגג שלישי של חסר שלישי, and from that haser to a different roof of a different haser, ומגג שלישי למבוי, and from that roof to an alleyway, ומן המבוי לגג רביעי, and from that alleyway to a fourth roof, עד שיעבירנו כל המדינה כולה דרך גגות וחסרות או דרך גגות וקלפפות, או דרך חסרות וקלפפות, או דרך שלושתם מזה לזה ומזה לזה, ובלבד שלא ייכנס בכלי זה לבית מן הבתים, אלא אם ערבו כל אנשי המקומות האלו ערב אחד. And he may in this way move objects from domain to domain, from these permitted domains, from roof to roof, from karpef to karpef, from haser to haser, interchangeably, through the entire city. And this is all on condition that the objects rested, entered Shabbat in one of these interchangeable domains. And this is also on condition that he does not take it into the house from a different haser that it did not rest in. So if I have an object that rested in my haser, I may take it from the haser into my house. However, if I moved it to a different haser, I can't take it into the house of that haser. I may only move it back to my haser, to a different haser roof or karpef. And this I can move the things into houses only if an eruv was placed within the haserot that I was moving, or within the confines that I was moving in and out of. Halacha kaf. וכן אם שבת הכלי בבית והוציאו לחסר לא יעבירנו לחסר אחרת. Also, if the object entered Shabbat when it was in the house and he took it out to the haser, in other words, he was able to, because he had an eruv between his house and the haser and the yard, לא יעבירנו לחסר אחרת או לגג אחר או לראש הכותל או לקרפף, אלא אם כן יערבו כל אנשי המקומות שמעבירים בהן כלי זה ערוב אחר. He may take it out to his own haser that he did eruv with, but he may not take it out if it entered Shabbat in his house, in the confines of his house. He may not take it out to a different haser from his haser, etc., 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 into the interchangeable domains, unless an eruv was placed connecting all of these domains together, or connecting the domains that he was moving in and out of together. So for example, I have 2 haserot that we did eruv between. We did a joint eruv between them. And my object rested in my house on Shabbat. Now I took it out to my haser. In other words, it entered Shabbat in my house. Now I took it from my house to the haser. Now I may take it out to whatever haser I want to, but I may not put it into the houses of that haser, except the haser which I did a joint eruv with, in which I would be able to take my object into the haser and take from that haser into the house. However, if I bring it to a third haser that I didn't do a joint eruv with, for example, then I wouldn't be able to bring from that haser into the houses of that haser because I didn't do a joint eruv with it, and so on and so forth. Now, in the following halachot, we'll see the details regarding a separation in between 2 haserot, when the separation was put into a water storage pit or some sort of well, and it seems that we're not talking about a natural spring here, which is what we call a be'er mayim hayim. Halacha kaf aleph. בור שבין שתי חצרות. A water source, a water storage area, a pit of water or well of water that is in between two חצרות, which are not jointly معورבים, which do not have a joint eruv placed in between them. Because when you have two حصرات that have a joint eruv placed in between them, it is as though it's one حصر. So whenever he says two حصرات, he's obviously referring to حصرات that does not have a joint eruv. So again, a well that is in between two حصرات, אין ממלאים ממנו מים בשבת, אלא אם כן עשו לו מחיסה גבוהה 10 טפחים, כדי שיהיה כל אחד ואחד עולה מרשותו. So a well that is in between two حصرات, it is not permitted to take water from that well on Shabbat to the people of one haser and to their house, etc., unless they put a wall in the well separating between the parts of the well. So the half of the well would be for one haser, the other half for the other haser, so that every person will be distinctly taking from his reshut and not from the other person's haser, from his haser and not from the other person's haser. So the border needs to be made. And how and where do we put the mehisa? If the mehisa was going to be above the water, if in other words the separation in the well was going to be above the water, then the separation has to be protruding into the water one tefach down, one fistful down. However, if the separation was going to be put all down into the depth of the water, it has to have one tefach coming out of the water, so that the separation of the parts of the well are noticeable. So the well is separated into two. One side is for one haser, the other side is for the other haser, respectively. And that way it would be permitted for the residents of the haser to take from the well into their haser and vice versa. הלכה כ"ב. וכן אם עשו על פי הבור קורה רחבה 4 טפחים, זה ממלא מצד הקורה וזה ממלא מצדה השני. Also, if they put on top of the well some sort of board that was 4 tefachim wide in the middle of the well, as some sort of like a separation, a visible separation, making a border between the two sides of the well, זה ממלא מצד הקורה וזה, they may, each person may fill up from his side of the haser, וכאילו הבדיל החלק זה מחלק זה, אף על פי שהמים מעורבים מלמטה, קלהו שהקלו חכמים במים. And even though the water is mixed from below that board, which is placed on top of the water, floating on top, nevertheless it does not matter, because the separation is what matters. And Hachamim were less stringent because it was this is not a scriptural law. We're talking about a law that the sages placed and enacted and formulated. הלכה כ"ג. באר שבאמצע השביל בין שני כותלי חצרות. A well which is in the middle of a path which is splitting between two walls of two separate haserot. אף על פי שהיא מופלגת מכותל זה 4 טפחים ומכותל זה 4 טפחים שניהם ממלאים ממנה ואין צריכים להוציא זיזין על גבה. Even though the well is more than 4 tefachim far from the walls. So I'll give an example. Imagine you have a pathway that is between two haserot, two walls of haserot, and the pathway is 20 tefachim wide, and there's a well in the middle. So you have more than 4 tefachim from each wall to the well. Now, in Ilchot Shabbat, we learned that if there's more than 4 tefachim from each wall to the well, it would be not permitted to fill up from the wall to the well unless you've made a protrusion coming into the wall. However, here the case is not so. And they may both fill up from the well through their walls. Let's, for example, they would have a window and they would lower a bucket into the well, etc. Because and they do not, and really the whole point of this halakha is that you would think that maybe because they both have access to the well via their walls, via their windows, by lowering their buckets into it, it would be not permitted for them to use it unless they make some sort of separation. Here, the case is not such, and they do not need to make a separation because the well is placed in so to speak no man's land. It's in a path in between both haserot. The path does not belong to either haser, and therefore it is not as though they're taking out from each other's haserot. It is as though they're taking out from a well to their house and from their house to the well, and therefore it is permitted. Halakha kafdalet. From this halakha until the end of the chapter, we will be dealing with the details of separations or passageways that were damaged on Shabbat itself. Haser ketana shenifresa, במלואها. לחסר גדולה מבעודיים. A small חסר that was connected due to breaking of the wall that was splitting. So small haser that had a wall splitting between it and a big haser, some sort of separation between it and a big haser. And the separation was removed on Shabbat, and now the two haserot are connected. Sorry, and the wall and the separation was removed before Shabbat. In this case, what do we do? Do they need to make an eruv for them, a joint eruv or not? So أنشاء גדולה מערבים לעצמנו מותרים, שהרי נשאל להם פסים מכאן ופסים מכאן. ואנשי הקטנה אסורים להוציא מבתיהן לחסר שהן, עד שיערבו עם בני הגדולה עירוב אחד. The residents of the large haser may do an eruv for themselves alone, because the break of the wall is, so to speak, for them it's just a passageway outwards. However, the small haser, for them, the break of the wall is not a small passageway, it's the whole wall almost. And if they want to be able to carry from their houses to the haser, they must do a joint eruv with the larger haser. Now, there is a little bit what to be discussed in this halakha. It is not apparent, not so clear. Maybe if the smaller, you may think that maybe the smaller haser, if also for it, the break looks like some sort of passageway, like a door, then maybe they wouldn't need to do a joint eruv with a bigger haser. I'm living in Tzarich Ayun. I'm not sure. If anybody has an answer to give me, I would love to hear it. And the reason, the guiding rule for the halakha is because the residents of the big haser are meaningful to the ones of the small haser, but not vice versa. Maybe this would answer my question, the question I just raised. halakha kafhe. שתי חסרות שערבו עירוב אחד דרך הפתח שביניהם, או דרך החלון, ונסתם הפתח או החלון בשבת, כל אחד ואחד מותרת לעצמה. Two חסרות that made in Eruv on Shabbat, the joint Eruv, by virtue of some sort of opening in between them. We said the opening is what causes them to be allowed to have an optional joint Eruv. And the opening was closed on Shabbat for whatever reason. Okay? The Eruvin are still in place, and they still may carry from their Haserot to their houses, etc. Even though the opening was, the opening, their Eruv was a joint Eruv, even though the opening that would allow the Eruv to be a joint Eruv was shut, it still does not invalidate their eruv. וכן שתי חסרות שערבה זו לעצמה וזו לעצמה ונפל קוטל שביניהם בשבת. Right, הואילו והותרה מקצת שבת ותרה כולה. Because the rule is, once the eruv, once the once this eruv was in place for part of Shabbat, it is as though it was in place for the rest of the Shabbat. And we saw in the previous chapters that also, if the eruv was in place for Ben HaShemashot, if there was a moment in Ben HaShemashot in which the eruv was kosher, so to speak, which was placed correctly, adequately, then it would hold the eruv valid for the rest of the Shabbat, even if the eruv came out of place. So I would say that also for this halakha, although Harambam here uses the term hutra miksat Shabbat, even though it was permitted on a bit of Shabbat, it would seem that also Ben HaShemashot falls under this category. וכן שתי חסרות שערבה זו לעצמה וזו לעצמה ונפל קוטל שביניהן בשבת, אלו מותרים לעצמן ומוסעים מבתיהן ומטלטלים על עיקר המחיסה, ואלו מטלטלים כן על עיקר המחיסה. Also, two חסרות that made a separate eruv. In other words, they had an option. They made a separate eruv because there was a separation in between them, and the separation fell on Shabbat. They still may carry from their homes into their haserot as long as they go all the way to the border where the separation originally was. They may not pass that border. They have to act as though the separation was still in place, because that is where they were permitted to carry, nevertheless, on Shabbat, when their eruv was in place and in the adequate manner. הואיל והותרה מקצת שבת ותרה כולה, אבל פי שנתווספו הדיורים שהדיורים הבאים בשבת אינם אוסרים. Even because, as we said, the rule is, the guiding rule is here, that because once the eruv was in place in an adequate manner for part of Shabbat, we consider it as though it was in place adequately for the rest of Shabbat. וכן שתי חסרות שערבה זו לעצמה וזו לעצמה ונפל קוטל שביניהם בשבת, מחילה, I read this. And even though the residents of this haser were supposedly added, it does not make a difference. Okay, נפתח החלון ונעשה הפתח בשגגה. או שעשו גויים לדעתן, חזרו להיתרן. So we said, in a case where an eruv was in place on Shabbat, and It was in a joint eruv between two hasilot was in place on Shabbat by virtue of an opening in between them. And the opening was closed on Shabbat. If the opening was reopened on Shabbat for whatever reason, either a Jew did it not on purpose, or Goyim did it on purpose. Now, if a Jew did it on purpose, it would still be invalid. But a Jew did it not on purpose, Goyim did it even on purpose, not for the Jew, not for the purpose of the Jew. Then the openings come back to allow the haser to be carried in, and to allow to carry from haser to haser. וכן שתי ספינות שהיו קשורות זו בזו וערבו ונפסקו, אסור לטלטל מזו לזו, ואפילו היו מקיפות מחסה, חזרו ונקשרו בשוגג, חזרו ליתרן. Also two ships that were tied one to another, and thus allowing them to make an eruv one between each other, and the tie was cut on Shabbat. They're not permitted to carry one from another. However, even if they separation, if there was a wall surrounding them from all sides, however, if they were somehow tied back on Shabbat, as long as it was b'shogeg and not on purpose, in this case, they may carry from ship to ship on Shabbat. We finished today's chapter. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen.